Thank you so much for having me. So yes, my name is Stella Kazamia. I am coming from the University of Surrey. Um, so I am the director of employability. A lot of people ask me what that actually means. So I'm just going to clarify within 60 seconds or so before moving into the actual presentation. So I have an academic role within the university. So I'm a senior lecturer, but one of my secondary roles is to look after anything that has to do with employability for our computer science students. So anything that has to do with placement, summer internships, graduate roles, anything that could potentially enhance their employability and readiness to join the market. So today I'll be talking about one of the various initiatives that we run under this role of employability, which is to use GenAI tools to improve the students' job readiness and the sorts. Let's see. I think someone already mentioned this, so apologies for the duplication. But I like to always start my sessions with this quote, regardless if it has to do with employability or any of my academic modules, which is, there is nothing permanent except change. So everything changes, which is basically what I'm trying to say. And the reason that I start with this is because everything does change. So the job market changes, the tools that we use change, the expectations change. Everything seems to be kind of on a constant change. So I always start with that little kind of quote. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about was what is AI? And I think the previous presenters have already mentioned what we mean by AI and the differences between AI, machine learning, but also the difference between AI and generative AI. But just to highlight, with just very briefly, is that it's a scientific field. It's all about research. It's all about development. It's an area where it does allow you to take various data sets and analyze that data to then make some meaningful outputs. Now, the term meaningful can be interpreted differently based on the algorithm that you're using. Some of them are not necessarily meaningful or very sensible, but as you feed more data and you train it with larger data sets, the output will become a bit more meaningful, a bit more sensible, a bit more accurate. But the difference between GenAI and AI is that GenAI can actually be trained in large data sets and generate responses based on your prompt. So it's not necessarily generating responses based on that data set that has already been trained on, but it's actually using that training as well as your own prompt to specify and give you something a little bit more targeted to what you have requested. We have, as previous speakers said, we've got various GenAI tools, and there is a link called, there's an AI for that or something along those lines. And when you Google that link, it gives you, if not hundreds, maybe 200 or 300 various tools that you can use for various tasks, from generating slides to transcripts to summarizing papers and the sorts. But with this particular project that we're doing for employability, we are only using the tools that I have highlighted on the slide in front of us. So DALL-E, Copilot, ChatGPT, ELESIG, and Gemini. Now, the reason that we have selected those tools is because some of those tools are provided by the university. Some of those tools, we have licenses from our partners, and some of them are freely available. So it's kind of a combination of those three different aspects. Before starting any of our sessions, I also include this session, this slide, apologies. And this slide summarizes that in our sessions for the employability related activities, we normally use ChatGPT, Copilot, and various other tools, but students have to be aware of protecting their personal data. They have to be mindful of what they share with those tools. They have to use the critical thinking and evaluate the output that that particular tool provides, but also be responsible when using such tools. What we mean by that is that we feel that because there's this uncertainty about how the data is managed within those tools, that students have to be mindful on whether they want to share their private data. Do they want this particular algorithm that trains on this data to know where they're from, their religion, their date of birth, their location, their interests. So what we do is we ask them to have this disclaimer at the back of their mind before moving into our activities. Because with employability activities, it's all about you and about your personal brand. It's all about your CV building, your cover letter writing, and sometimes it's very personable. So it's really difficult to balance the two. So we tell them to have this disclaimer at the back of their mind before coming into our sessions and go through the activities. So who are the students that we are targeting for this initiative? So we're targeting students that are currently in year 2 of the bachelor's degree or the undergrad degree, or in the first year of the MSc program. The reason that we target this particular cohort is because these particular cohorts are the ones that are seeking a placement the following year. So these are the students that will be completing their studies, and then by the end of that year, they will be looking, or during this year, they'll be looking for placement opportunities for the following year. So those placement opportunities can come under software engineering, software development, data science, cybersecurity, anything within the field of computer science. And in this particular series of sessions, and just to give you some background, there are 8 weeks worth of sessions. During those 8 weeks, we have employer presentations, we have exploration of the job market, we explain the expectations of the UK job market in specifically, and what is required for you to start applying to various roles within the market. And the reason that we do that over the first few weeks of this 8-week program is to make sure that we have kind of a clear understanding of the expectations for finding a placement, because we have students that are UK students, we have European students, we have international students coming from abroad, and not everyone is familiar with the processes. So the first few weeks of this 8-week program is to cover the expectations, and everyone has kind of a ground understanding of what is expected of them. Following that, we then have employer presentations, and we have partners and industry members coming to the university, either virtually or in person, to provide some insights about the role they have within the company or organization that they work in. Those roles are normally within computer science. And the reason that we do that is to inspire the students to understand a little bit more on what that role entails, but also to inspire them to potentially network with these individuals and then get some mentoring and coaching to get a similar role in the future, whether that is a placement or a graduate role. Towards the end of this 8-week period, this is where the GenAI tools sit. And the GenAI tools are sitting towards the last 2 weeks of this 8-week program. And what we do is we ask students to go through a process. So we ask them to reflect on what they've completed and what they've heard, what they've learned over the previous weeks, and then use a GenAI tool of their choice, based on what I've showed you earlier, to do the following activities. So the first activity is to identify an ideal job role based on their work preferences, their personal traits, their skills, their strengths, their weaknesses, and actually prompt those AI tools to help them identify a role that could potentially fit nicely to their expectations. We also ask them to identify skills that are good at and skills that are not necessarily good at, and potentially use these AI tools to provide them with tests to grade them on how good they are in a particular skill. Those skills can be skills on the technical side. So it could be programming skills on a particular language. It could be more of a personal or interpersonal skills. So for example, we might ask AI tools to help us develop our critical thinking. It could help us with our writing skills, reflective writing, and the sorts. And the final step under this category of ideal job roles is the AI-free, I call it, career advice, where students come to get help from myself or the placements team on how they can take all of this learning from the AI tool and make it a reality and make actually more informed decisions on what that means moving forward. Now, going back to that disclaimer, we have asked students to be mindful of the type of information that they're sharing. So if they want to identify roles that meet their personality, that meet their skills, that meet their interests, but also their preferences, they somehow have to give some information to this AI tool. So to go around this, we have asked students to create a persona. So they can name themselves whatever they want. So I've called myself Alex. I always like the name Alex. And I've given some information on background, goals, and skills. So I'm giving the AI tool some information about this person, Alex, that is very similar to me without necessarily giving them any particular personal details I don't want anyone else to know. I am Alex. I am a second-year computer science student. I feel that I have a strong foundation in programming languages, in Python and Java, with just a little bit of exposure on C++. I've done an 8-week internship. I have some dreams in working in cutting-edge tech firm, like every other computer science student, very, very typical. I like collaborative work, and I also value mentorship. So I'm looking for a role that could potentially help me develop myself further. And I have also identified some skills and interests that I have. Based on this persona, I can then start prompting the AI tool specific questions. For example, given this persona that I have already provided to you, what are the most in-demand skills for a specific job title? For example, software engineer, marketing manager right now. Please compare the roles that you have identified. What are the differences between them? And does my background fit this particular role? Given Alex's background in computer science, which job roles would align nicely? Which job roles would you recommend? And Alex, which is myself, is thinking of applying to a data science role at Deloitte. What are some skills, values, and attributes valued within that industry? So again, I'm not necessarily giving them my personal information. I'm not necessarily disclosing anything that I don't want any individual to not know. So I'm using this persona to fit nicely from these questions. The next session, so we have a session on identifying job roles. The second session is actually crafting a compelling application. And we've split this session into two parts, in creating a compelling application with a sense of CV and cover letters, but also creating completing an application. Prior to going into this session, we always ask students to become familiar with the application tracking system approach. Now, a lot of different companies, especially companies and organizations that are on a larger scale, they have this application tracking system that will automatically evaluate the CV and the cover letters that have been submitted to this platform, and then either reject automatically or accept automatically some of those applications. Now, there are a lot of feelings about this particular approach. Not everyone likes the approach of using the ATS. However, because it's already being used in industry, students have to be familiar with it. So we explain how it works. We explain that it works based on keywords, and that their CV and their cover letters should ensure that they have those keywords that the ATS system, the application tracking system, will be looking for. So over the first part of the session, we talk about using AI tools to help them develop their CV cover letters, and also with personalization. So they can tailor the CV and any other content within that cover letter to the job application that they have in mind. The job application can be copied and pasted in the AI tool, given that it's already publicly available. And then with regards to their CV and cover letters, they always go back to that persona they had previously created. During the second part of the session, we talk about applications more specifically. Now, application forms have a particular design, and therefore you don't necessarily upload a document that you have already crafted yourself. So you need to be a little bit mindful on understanding each question that is being posed to you, understand what the expected answer is, or what is expected of you to put, I should say, as an answer, and then provide the appropriate information. So what we do during that second part of the session is we take a sample application form and we copy each and every question in AI tool and ask the AI tool to explain this question without necessarily giving any answers. So we're not using any personas, we're not using it to generate any information. We're actually using the AI tool in this particular instance to explain in different terms what those questions are asking us to do. And what we've seen with this approach is that it really helped our international students comprehend the questions that are sometimes a little bit not straightforward in terms of writing. So we asked them to potentially rephrase in a way that they would have understand, or terminology that they would understand. And the final step that we do as part of this session on the crafting a compelling application is to ensure that they use AI tools if needed for any proofreading and editing. So we've seen that when you use AI tools, there are some certain keywords that tend to pop up all the time. For example, delve into or analyze or specialize. Everything around that kind of bag of keywords seems to be popping up when you're doing proofreading and editing tools. So towards the end of that session, after going through the use of AI tools for proofreading and editing, we always ask them to highlight every single instance where the phrase delve into has been brought up, specialization with a Z, analyze and the sorts. We are also very fortunate, I'm not going to play this video, but we're also very fortunate to have something called the CV360 system at the University of Surrey. Now, this CV360 is, once you have already created your CV and your cover letter, you can upload a PDF version to this system. And what it would do, it will go through various checks around structure, content, language, presentation, and the sorts around your CV, and it will give you a percentage on how good or bad your particular CV is doing with relation to those checks. And the higher the percentage, in theory, the better. Now, if you have a lower percentage than 100, let's say you have 60%, it will identify which areas you have missed, and it will give you automatic suggestions on what you can change on your CV. So following our session on CV cover letter writing using AI tools, we then tell them to take the output of that CV and feed it into this CV360 application. This is not a complex ATS, it's not a complex application tracking system, but it's a system that does provide some quick feedback on your document. Now, the final thing that we do as part of these employability sessions that are enhanced by AI tools is preparation for interview process. So we're making the assumption that you have already identified a role that is suitable for you. You have drafted your CV and your cover letter. You have added all your data in your application form for that particular job role. And now you have been invited to an interview process. So you have to prepare yourself through potentially some mock interviews or potentially through some mock questions that could come up to that interview. So we go through a few steps during this final session, which is interview rehearsal. So we conduct mock interviews with the students. So that is done potentially, this is an AI-free interview rehearsal. Following the mock interviews, we then have a question anticipation, which is through AI tools. So we do go through a very quick mock interview for about 10-15 minutes per student, and then we move on into them going into their computers and using AI tools to prompt the AI tool to suggest potential questions that could come up with a real interview. Now, the mock interview was done based on a sample job application, whereas the question anticipation part is based on an application that they have made. So they can add the details of a company, they can add the details of the role that they're going into, and ask the AI tool to generate some potential questions that could come up. After completing those questions and preparing themselves, we then have a final coaching that does take a few weeks to complete. And this is an AI-free advice again. So we do coach the students if interview applications come through. And these are some of the examples that Alex has received after prompting the AI tools to provide some questions that could come up in the interview. So tell me about yourself, for example, Alex, and then this is kind of a very brief summary provided by ChatGPT in particular. And it also drafted a few questions that could come up in that interview with a possible answer. I did exactly the same with Copilot, for example, and then Copilot didn't give me answers to those questions. But interestingly, it split the questions into various topics. So I had technical questions, questions about myself, questions about my future plans and the sorts, and then sub-questions for each category. During the coaching part, this is what we're using. So we're using the STAR method. And for those that are not familiar with the STAR method, it's a method that we use normally for interviews, and it stands for situation, task, action, and results. Situation, you set the stage. So this is what happened. Task, this is what I did. action, you explain every single step that you went through. And then the results, you normally say something positive in terms of results, just to impress the interviewer. Now, what we're looking into doing potentially next year is those two parts that we haven't done before. We want to add a session on personal branding and ask students to start thinking about the digital footprints. And to do that, we want to help students understand their target audience and tailor their information that they do project on social media, on LinkedIn and other platforms, but also help them in creating compelling content that could potentially help them showcase their expertise. For example, creating portfolios that demonstrate their programming skills, the team leading skills and the sorts. And to do this personal brand session, we want to incorporate AI tools once again. So I'll be more than happy to receive any feedback from the audience on how this could potentially be achieved without necessarily providing any personal data to these AI tools. And just to end the session, I just want to say that what we do want to encourage students and also ourselves as users of these AI tools is to remember to be the human in the loop. So yes, we can use AI tools to receive information, to generate data, but sometimes we have to be a little bit more critical and be that human that will evaluate the output and say, yes, it's right, no, it's not right, and then potentially prompt it even further to get more meaningful results. So I hope I am under the 20 minutes, but thank you so much.